Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our meeting. In our first hour, we have some familiar faces. We have the Forest Products Association of Canada. These guys, you guys need no introduction to us, and you know how the process works too. Thanks very much for joining us today. We also have Derek Nybor and Kate Lindsay, I should say. Thanks, guys, for coming. Really appreciate it. And then from the Quebec Forest Industry Council, we have Jean-François Samaret. Can everybody hear me okay, the three of you? Okay. You all know the process. You know how the committee works. You each have, each group has up to 10 minutes to deliver opening remarks. You can speak in language of your choice. There's translation services available. So without taking up any more time listening to me, I will turn the floor over to you, Derek and Kate. Why don't you start us off since you're first on the agenda?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes, great. So I'll be starting and then Derek will be speaking as well. So good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Canada's forest product sector is ready to play a key role in driving economic recovery, especially in rural and northern forestry communities. And at the same time, bring health and environmental benefits and greater self-sufficiency to Canada and Canadians. As mentioned, my name is Kate Lindsay. I'm FPAC's Senior Vice President, and I'm joined today by my colleague, FPAC's President and CEO, Derek Nybor. Let me begin by talking about the fundamentals upon which Canadian forestry is built. Canada is blessed with a tremendous natural and renewable resource in our forests. We have the second most forested lands in the world, making up 40% of our land base. Canada's managed forest, the area under active management, is primarily under the purview of provincial governments. 94% of the lands upon which FPAC member companies operate are on Crown lands and are subject to among the most rigorous governance frameworks in the world. Canada's forest and our sustainable forest management regimes are dynamic in nature, continuously evolving to respond to the natural, human, and societal shifts that require small adjustments or sometimes more significant adjustments over time. Forest management planning in Canada happens at the local level and is driven by science and detailed monitoring. It considers dozens of values, from wildlife habitat requirements to watershed protection to fire risk mitigation. It receives and reflects input and knowledge from local municipalities, Indigenous peoples, regional recreation and outdoor groups, and other area rights holders and stakeholders. As with any local land development planning, there are often competing values and interests. It is part of our job to work with local communities on solutions that find balance and co-benefits. Layered on top of provincial rules and local input is another level of accountability and transparency. This is third-party forest certification. Just 11% of the world's forests are third-party certified. 35% of those certified forests are here in Canada. It's another reason why, in a recent Leger study of nearly 200 global wood, pulp, and paper buying customers, Canada ranked #1 in the world. International customers cited quality, reliability, sustainability, and good forest management as being reasons why Canada is their #1 choice. This natural Canadian advantage is a huge opportunity for us as we look at post-pandemic recovery opportunities. I'll now turn it over to Derek Nybor, who will speak to some of the solutions and recommendations.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I want to turn to those opportunities and some of the areas where we see forestry workers doing even more for both our economy and the environment. The first we brand under the safeguarding the future of our forests. Climate change has emerged as one of the most important transformational challenges, placing unprecedented pressure on our forest's capacity to remain healthy and resilient. And we've seen this by way of worsening pest outbreaks in the east and the west and wildland fire. Forests that are actively managed for the long term together with the wood products harvested from them, are a key tool in the fight to address climate change. Active management will continue to provide those environmental benefits, societal benefits, as well as building more resiliency into Canada's forests for the future. One of the other areas is under bringing more capital investment to Canada. And we've worked with FPAC members and non-members in recent months and have identified over 140 shovel-ready projects, capital projects worth over $1.5 billion in value that can sustain and grow jobs across the country, improve our competitiveness, and improve our environmental performance. We look forward to talking with you a bit more about those details. Jobs and products for our people. We can sustain and grow family-supporting jobs in communities that desperately need them. By strengthening our sector domestically, we can also ensure that we have a strong supply of lumber and wood products, pulp and paper, wood fiber-based health and hygiene products, and bioproducts made right here in Canada, so we can provide for our people. This includes important opportunities for SMEs, including over 1,400 Indigenous-owned forestry businesses that are a critical part of our sector. And I think back earlier in the spring when President Trump stopped that shipment of 3M masks at the border, medical masks that contain northern reinforced pulp from Canadian forests, is a reminder to us about the importance and the opportunity for greater self-sufficiency in terms of how we manage the resource and we deal with value-added manufacturing here. And the other solution is around growing export markets. We're really well positioned to be a global leader in sustainably sourced, manufactured renewables, bringing more quality, innovative products to the world. So we have a few comments on how you can help get us there. The first area is around greater clarity between federal and provincial governments and more predictable or certain access to the working land base. As Kate said, 94% of the lands upon which our members operate are governed by provincial governments. We need your support to ensure there's greater coherence and clarity between federal and provincial jurisdictions. Certainty around access to that land base, to wood fiber, it's important to our workers, our contractors and forestry communities. Increasing levels of duplication between federal and provincial governments inhibits our ability to attract much needed capital. On market access and market development, we'd like to see a continued focus on trade agreements, diversifying and growing export markets, and building code modernization to allow for bigger and more resilient carbon storing wood buildings that will bring benefits to our people. And the final comment I wanted to make is around selling Canada's good news story to the world. Our pulp and paper mills have reduced GHG emissions by about 70% since the early 90s. In its most recent State of Canada's Forest report, Natural Resource Canada has confirmed that our managed forest is a carbon sink of 14 megatons. Canadian forestry has a compelling story that resonates with our global customers. Despite this Canadian advantage, our customers and investors, however, are increasingly being targeted by anti-industry groups and misinformation campaigns to drive business away from Canada. This is putting Canadian jobs at risk in the process. We need our federal and provincial governments to stand with us so we can sustain and grow jobs, keep our northern communities safer from fire, and advance the economic and environmental benefits that Canadian forestry and forest products provide. I want to thank you for the invitation today, and we look forward to getting into a bit of discussion on these items during the Q&A. Thanks again.
Great, thanks very much. Mr. Samray, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Speaker. I'll go part of my presentation in French and part in English. So my name is Jean-François Samin. I'm the new CEO of QFIC, the Quebec Forest Industry Council, the CIFQ, Conseil de l'Industrie Forestière du Québec. I'm really happy to be with you today. And I'll be presenting, not go in the same details as Derek and presented, just bring you some images and more details of what can it look like in a province just like Quebec. So, le Conseil de l'Industrie Forestière représente.
The Quebec Forest Industry Council represents about 250 members who are active in the different types of wood, pulp and paper, panel, laminates, as well as in engineered wood, which is used to make new types of constructions using wood. In Quebec, on an annual basis, the forestry sector contributes 140 jobs to the economy, well paid, about 65,000. That's the average a year income in these jobs. And annually, the members of the Quebec Forestry Industry Council and the jobs that they generate provide $4.8 million in taxes.
Are paid in tax and income taxes from the industry to government. Et ça, c'est fait à partir d'un.
And this is out of a $20 billion industry sector, which is 4.7% of Quebec's gross domestic product. So about 70% of Quebec's municipalities are directly linked to forestry, have jobs which depend on the forestry sector to differing degrees based on the region by region. But it is clear that 1 out of 5 municipalities of Quebec uses the forest. And when the forestry sector slows down, it's a catastrophe for these towns and cities and these regions. I'm convinced that it's much the same for many of the other provinces of Canada and across the various regions of Canada that you know of. In Quebec, forest is 970 million square kilometers.
More than 900,000 square kilometers, all close to a million, therefore. And annually, we cut, replant, and harvest 0.2% of that area. Donc, le fait de.
So, I think what Derek and Nyber was mentioning is exactly that it's important to manage our forestry in Quebec. 0.2% of the area that's cut and that is used, and that's really only 0.2% of our territory. So it's a very sustainable sector, as they were pointing out. In Quebec, our forest is now being affected by a fifth conflict about wood with the United States, not only logging, but the entire sector. I want to point this out because we keep a very close watch on the countervailing duties charged at the American border. And right now, we're over $4 billion that we have spent. $1 billion of that comes from Quebec companies. And this is a lot of funds that we cannot use to buy new equipment, to modernize, to use new technologies to make our forestry sector in Quebec and Canada even better, to make it more efficient. So it's really important in our sector that the WTO agreements be respected and that we reach a negotiated agreement. It will be important to remind our neighbors that even the National Association of Home Builders has written to President Trump, and about 98 members of Congress have also written to the president to push for a solution because this is hurting the American middle class. So what we expect and what we would truly appreciate from the federal government would be to negotiate a solution to this trade problem. As for climate change, I think it's been said before, a growing forest is a carbon sink. It's also a forest that can be used to construct in wood, and every cubic meter used this way will stock a ton of carbon. It's a sink. And when you replace using, in other words, wood to replace other more carbon-intensive products, it can represent 2 tons. So I think what you will need to keep in mind for the next budget cycle is to keep in mind and find a special place for wood construction and to support this because you're really doing so much good. You're reducing greenhouse gases, you're stimulating the economy, and you're also, making Canadians proud. We have a maple leaf on our flag. What better way is there to ensure that we respect our Canadian heritage than to use wood in our building? We also need to respect the pulp and paper sector. It needs to be transformed. The current regulation underway to protect us from plastics would be so well served if we could use cellulose-based products instead of plastics. I think the iFit program, which is funded by the government, very popular in our sector, by the way, is a good step forward. I know that you have provided for more funding for that, but I would say that for every dollar that you invest in the sector, we actually need 10. So perhaps go over that program, the IFIB program, to ensure that we make use of it fully to reduce greenhouse gases, important for our sector, and settle the softwood lumber trade issue. Yes, we've explained that. We've managed the aluminum trade issue. Now let's deal with the softwood lumber trade issue. I think we have a good idea what to do for that. And to accelerate as well, the setup of programs that go public to encourage the use of wood. Again, pulp and paper is an important sector. They use all the residues, residues from the mills, the sawdust and so on. Most of the pulp and paper industries are in Quebec, given that electricity costs less here and that we can transform the fiber. We need to help them transform fiber into various packaging, fabrics, packaging materials, and so on. I think this type of programming will allow Canada to relaunch the economy while reducing pollution and greenhouse gases. Once we'll be able to do all this well at home, then we can develop markets overseas. We'll be able to show that we have the technology and we have the programming to manage our forest better than any other country on the planet, and that we're proud of doing this, and that we're proud of bringing down our greenhouse gas emissions. And we're proud to show this to the rest of the world. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to discuss this with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samray. Okay, so we made up some time there. So I think first up is Ms. Harder. Are you?
Thank you, Chair. I am in the committee room.
Okay, that's why I couldn't see you. Okay.
No problem.
Floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My question goes to Mr. Nyber. I'm keenly aware of a promise that was made by the Prime Minister with regards to planting 2 billion trees in 10 years. Now, he made this promise a little bit under pressure by Greta last September when he met with her on the campaign trail. To date, not a single tree has been planted, and that's been confirmed by numerous sources, including an official, the deputy minister the assistant deputy minister who was here last week. She not only told us that not a single tree has been planted, but also that there's no plan to do so, which was a little bit disheartening for us to hear in terms of how far that has gone. Now, in order to reach their goal of planting 2 billion trees by 2030, some basic math would tell me that the government would now need to plant roughly 1.2 million trees per day, which seems like a lot. You would know better than I do in terms of that. But I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about what kind of pressure this amount of trees would put on nurseries to grow millions of seedlings in order to get them into the ground within the time frame, which is remaining 9 years, in order to make good on this promise.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that, and then Kate, if you want to, if there's anything I miss, feel free to come in behind. We actually offered advice to the government, and I'd be happy to share that through the chair to the full committee in terms of our advice on how to launch a successful tree planting program. Our industry plants 500 to 600 million seedlings every year across the country. And I'm really proud that this year the plant went ahead without any major outbreaks. I know, and that came with a lot of collaboration with governments and northern mayors and councils and northern Indigenous communities. We did such a good job, actually. It was the tree planters who were worried about the northern locals in terms of contracting COVID. So a lot of great work was done. So we do have a lot of experience in this area. In the advice we shared with government, a couple of things. Number one, the seedlings don't just pop up. We need time to build capacity, and it can take up to 4 years to do that, to build that capacity. But given we plant on average 1,000 trees every minute, once the capacity is there, the ability to do that planting can happen. but it's the capacity crunch we worry about for a couple of reasons. Number one, you want to get value for taxpayer dollars here, because if you have a surge and there's not enough capacity, the prices are going to go through the roof for both the federal government and for our companies. That's not great. The other thing we want to do is we'd want to make sure that it's actually experienced people doing the planting, those who are planting for resiliency and so that those trees don't die. So I really hope as the government goes forward that we're going to tap into existing resources. You know, provincial governments, Indigenous communities, nurseries existing have a lot of expertise. It's really not a time to find some newbie to start doing this stuff, because it is very complicated work and you want to be planting the right trees in the right places. But the nursery capacity, I'd say, is a really big challenge. And also what I'd like to see, actually, you also don't want to have this 2 billion surge and then just stop planting. If you want to build that business capacity in that nursery sector, I'd love to see a longer term commitment to continue to do this so the investments would be worthwhile. The other thing I'll add to that is in terms of the planting itself, we see a huge opportunity in more urban forests and urban communities, in rural communities, and also to plant in areas of our working forests that have been hit by pests and fire. So as JF said, we replace what we harvested, Canada. We actually replace more than what we harvest. But if you have land that's attacked by pests or is burned by fire, there's a bit of a gap there, because that's then incumbent on provincial lands for the provincial governments to replace those trees. If they don't have the budget to do that, you're relying on natural regeneration. And in some scorched areas, that natural regeneration might not be happening. So this is also why we said to the federal government, please work with the provinces who know this stuff. Please work with Indigenous communities who know this stuff as you determine where in the working forest we can also plant trees beyond just those in the urban and rural parts. So anyway, I've taken that in a few spaces, but I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Mr. Neighbor. You made an interesting
1 minute left.
You made an interesting point, though. You said that your company plants 5 to 6 million trees per year. If the government is to make good on their promise, they're going to have to plant 1.2 million per day. Is that doable?
Well, I think it depends when the planting starts. I'm not privy to the exact plans. I think like I said, we can plant 1,000 a minute if you have the infrastructure and the workers in place. The two supply crunch issues you need to watch is the nursery capacity, which can impact your ability to get the seedlings and also get them at a good price. You also have to consider the labor. You need boots on the ground to do this planting. So there's a fair bit of planning in terms of the infrastructure here. I'm not a silviculture expert myself. I don't run a nursery. Our companies work with those companies, but I'd really encourage the government to be working closely with those. That's center to the advice we provided to the government.
Thanks, Mr. Neighbor. Thanks, Ms. Harder. You're right on time, actually. Up next, we have Mr. Weiler for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, Ms. Lindsay, Mr. Neighbor, and Mr. Semre. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us today. And of course, COVID's caused us all to be quite flexible, pivot, and adapt to changing circumstances, but we're really grateful you're able to make some time and join our committee on such short notice today. In my home province of BC, it's really been a perfect storm impacting forestry, as you know, with the impact of COVID-19, the fiber supply, climate change, among others. And while there's been a reduction in demand for pulp and paper, we have seen growth in demand for wood as a construction project, in construction and in home improvement. The study that we're doing is looking at the economic recovery of the forestry sector. And the first hour, we're really going to focus on the state of the industry, and the second hour more on innovation. And I really appreciate your comments earlier. And you mentioned about some of the challenges and opportunities that are there for the forestry sector. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what role you see the federal government taking to support value addition within Canada.
Yeah, so is that for me, Mr. Weiler?
Sure, this first question for Mr. Neighbor.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think there's a number of things. I think, not far from your home community in Vancouver, we saw a recent move by the Vancouver City Council to move their building codes to 12 stories. They join 13 other, Richmond, Surrey, 13 other BC municipalities who are working in that space. I think we have seen the Horgan government commit to a value-added strategy, which we welcome. I think that's great. One of the things for us in working with that is in order to ramp up that kind of demand, you need to make sure the supply is sustainable, and you also need to ensure that there's certainty on that land base to support that business growth. So we're quite confident that the sustainability factors are there. Our goal is to keep those forests as forests forever. And provincial governments, including Diane Nichols, the chief forester in BC, she sets that allowable cut every year based on what the forest looks like, which is why we've seen a really difficult time in BC coming out of the mountain pine beetle and then the 2017-2018 fires, which in some communities, I know not far from where Mr. Zimmer lives, you've seen some communities lose, 20, 30, 40% of their allowable cut, which has meant, too many mills chasing too few trees, and that's led to some of the closures. So I think there's a whole host of issues at the provincial level in BC around stumpage costs, and that could extend to Quebec and Ontario and different provinces in terms of that cost to operate. But based on the stuff we can control, from a federal level, I think that value-added strategy around supporting tall wood, building code, ongoing innovation. I know Stéphane Renou and FP Innovations are going to talk a bit about that later on. But we do see huge opportunity in the value add. Government procurement is another area. I know Minister Murray and Andy Fillmore have been working on some of that. Richard Canning's had a private member's bill as well on that. So I think government procurement also is an avenue to explore.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Neighbor. And also in your comments, you mentioned looking at some of the opportunities in terms of jobs and products for the people. You mentioned ways we could strengthen the sector domestically, but also how we could provide innovative products for the world. And I'm just curious if you could give us some comments on what the federal government can do to support marketing wood products around the world, in addition to what it's doing already at this point.
Yeah, I say keep supporting organizations like Canada Wood and Quebec's equivalent wood promotion business. There's a lot of FedProv industry dollars going into some of those private-public partnerships to help grow markets. I think we have an opportunity to do more in that. I think the work that Canada Wood and we do on the lumber side is fairly advanced and working really well. I'd want to maintain that momentum. Let's continue. As one of our CEOs says, China is the new China. There continues to be a lot of opportunity in Asia for us. I think our exports to the U.S. now are around 22, 23 billion, and to Asia they're almost 9. So that's progress from a number of years ago. I would challenge the government, and we'd love to work with you on this in terms of finding other ways to grow markets for some of these new emerging materials and products in the bio space, and is there anything more we can do on the pulp and paper side to brighten their business prospects?
Great.
1 minute, Mr. Weiler.
Thank you. And I just want to touch on a question that one of my colleagues mentioned about the plan to plant 3 billion trees. And Mr. Neighbor, you mentioned the government support for reforestation this year, and I was just hoping you could talk a little bit more to what that's meant for the ability this year to be able to still carry out the tree planting work that needed to be done.
Yeah, so the tree plant. So there was a $30 million program, COVID-related launch to support contractors. That's being funneled through the provinces. So we appreciate the federal support there. I'd say there's mixed reviews now on how that money is flowing through at the ground level. And I would also say 30 million is not quite enough. If you think of all of these people going up where Bob Zimmer lives, and you can't put 6 in a truck or in a van, and you can't put 20 in a tent, and so there were a lot of contingencies and a lot of additional expenses. But listen, we appreciated the support, and the most important thing is we got the plant done and everybody stayed healthy.
Great, thanks very much, Mr. Neighbor. Mr. Weiler, appreciate that. Right on time. Mr. Simard, over to you for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Samray, Mr. Neighbor. Ms. Lindsay, I have a short question for Mr. Sumray. You have all mentioned the extraordinary potential that the forest offers us to fight climate change. It's a carbon sink. I think that's been shown. Now, I'm not sure what your view is of the following idea of the government setting specific targets for reducing our carbon footprint, for example. I think that if we had something of that nature, the sort of thing that we have in other contracts of the federal government, the idea of having the lowest carbon project being as important as the lowest cost project, then we could favor the wood industry and also fight climate change. So I'd like to know, Mr. Sumray, if you have thought through such a measure, if you have any concept of how we could include the carbon footprint as one of the factors for government contracts. I appreciate this question. I think if you were to adopt such a criteria, you would have to be able to calculate it. And right now, we are working up a tool that we're calling a tool for architects and for builders to evaluate how many greenhouse gases would be saved, and what level of emission of greenhouse gas would be saved by using wood to construct a building. And this calculator is certainly supported by our government and our industrial sector. We're now finalizing the last tweaks, and this tool will be available for general use. Inasmuch as the evaluation criteria for a contract, much as you can use energy efficiency codes, for example, well, if we had a GES carbon footprint factor for government procurement, this could be very helpful for the forestry sector in Canada. And I think that the forest is present in so many communities across the country, and it's always a local product nevertheless. The sector has been developing wood products that allow for mill work that makes it faster to construct on a site. These sorts of new products are now available. The more we have available, the more the federal government would be able to show them if they want to, and that will make it even easier to sell outside of our borders, because the Canadian government will have shown that, look, here are the buildings we're making in Canada. They're solid, they're long-term, and they help fight greenhouse gases, and they're available to the rest of you as well if you want to buy them from Canada. Thank you. You dealt briefly with the softwood lumber conflict, the trade issues with the United States, and provided us with some figures: $1 billion for Quebec, $4 billion for Canada as a whole. Having discussed this with the Resolute Bay people in the forestry industry, for example, they're up to $200 million right now. What seemed to be the issue for them was access to liquidity. The current federal government programs are such that you need to pretty much be in bankruptcy to have access to their programming, which of course isn't quite the state of most of the forest industry, as we can agree. So what do you think we should do to make liquidity more available to the sector, knowing that in the last 2006 softwood lumber dispute, we had to leave $6 million on the table? Billion. We have to keep in mind that the sector over the last few months has seen some very good prices on the market. But over a 10-year cycle, look, that hasn't always been the case. Liquidity that they need now to deal with their obligations over the next few months and their operations, their functional requirements, I think they need a government that would give banking guarantees and terms that would support them in the immediate. And liquidity would certainly help. They look this over, keeping in mind, of course, the WTO agreements. We'd have to take a close look to see how we would proceed, but I think this is a very good area and approach through which we can support the sector. We're convinced that the WTO has shown that the Canadian practices are respectful of international practices. The way we manage our forests in Canada is appropriate, so it would be good to have a negotiated agreement by the parties, and the government of Canada could support this. Quickly then, there's another issue which is a pretty important one, the transformation of the pulp and paper sector. We know that this transformation occurs by bringing some of the plants up to par, and that costs a good deal of money. If there were a strategy for transforming the pulp and paper sector, some sort of a funding strategy offered by the federal government, would this be a leg up for them? Do you have any idea of the type of initiatives that the federal government could undertake to support the transition for these mills? I think that my colleague has...
Move on to Mr. Cannings.
Okay, sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. And I'll pick up on something that Mr. Samar was talking about, and also what Mr. Nyber mentioned, because Mr. Nyber mentioned my private member's bill, which is about government procurement and about using a lens of climate action, of cutting down greenhouse gas emissions when letting government contracts for building. And I'm happy to say that private member's bill is in the Senate right now, and hopefully will start its way back to the House and have enough time to get there. But I'm just wondering if I could ask Mr. Nyber if he has any sense of how government procurement, building large wood buildings has been, because when the Conservatives killed my bill in the Senate in the last Parliament, I heard from various government members in the House, don't worry, procurement is happening, and what I was proposing in my bill was becoming practice in the government. I'm just wondering if that's really the case, or has it been noticeable, and what the state of that is.
Yeah, it hasn't been noticeable on the federal procurement side. We have more mature procurement policies in BC and in Quebec, which we see work. Maybe to give you some sense of the impact, I was going back looking at the UBC Brock Commons 18-story wood building. That building went up in 70 days, 4 months faster than it would have been if it was a traditionally built building. And in construction, carbon pollution was down 25 to 45%. So there definitely are speed, less big trucks on site at construction, faster time to construct. And NRCan had done a recent study on value-added wood and engineered wood, and anticipate there's an opportunity to move that production level in Canada from 4.4 billion a year to 6.4 billion a year by 2030. And we're seeing companies like Nordic in Quebec and a new Element 5 in St. Thomas, Ontario, and Structurlam in your home community of Penticton. I think there's an opportunity to do more there. Government procurement can help, but outside of the provincial governments, we haven't seen any noticeable procurement shifts that we'd say are making a difference.
So in terms of mass timber construction, then, is there, as you mentioned, Structurlam in my hometown, Penticton, we have Kolesnikov in the Kootenays has built a huge modern plant to do just that. You mentioned a few others. Is there a real trend to create more mass timber facilities in Canada? And maybe if you can move on from that, and perhaps Monsieur Samre could jump in as well, about how that might help us in our domestic market situation, as well as the international markets, but building a domestic market to help in cases where we've lost some of the international market, especially in the US.
Yeah, maybe I'll defer to JF. I've had a lot of airtime here, so he can talk about the Quebec experience.
Yeah, well, I think that it is something that is quite clear. Now it can be done. Now the know-how is there, and the industry knows how to do these things. And what Derek mentioned is, of course, it goes faster than when you use concrete. And on top of that, using engineered wood is something that is you use wood with the more value added. So we could also export these products down to the U.S. and none being facing some extra burden tax because they're value added products. So therefore, there's really an opportunity at the same time to create jobs, reduce GHG, but at the same time, create an expertise that is hardly taxable on the other side of the border. So yes, it can be done, and the way that government can help is really use its purchasing power as a showcase and make people proud of what it is. And we see that more and more schools are being built, municipal pools, stadiums are built, and we don't see any painting on these walls, just like there is on the one that are made out of concrete, because the youth are really proud of these buildings and the community gathers around it. So it creates also a sense of community around these buildings. So it's good for the environment, good for the community, good for value-added products, and it's really strong on what Canada does best. It's really a strength in engineering and introducing that with new wood products. I mean, it's a winning combination.
You have about 40 seconds, Mr. Canning. Okay, quickly, just what the other focus of this study is about how the forests can help us meet our climate change targets. You mentioned the narrative that forests are a carbon sink. The fact is they haven't been a carbon sink for the last 20 years. And I'm just wondering, my question would be, how can the forest industry help the forests help us reach those targets? Because, you know, the forest sector can do what other sectors do, but they are the ones managing our trees. And how can we help the forests reach those targets?
Kate?
Really, really, really quickly, please.
Okay, and we can share more of our brief, but FPAC, building on work scientists from NRCan have built an additional 30 megaton contribution that we can make, and that's through sustainable forest management and lots of different innovation within the managed forest, utilization of wood, so making a demand for some of those value-added products so they're not burned in slash piles, and then really some of the transformational changes through the supply chain and the benefits of using wood as displacing other fossil fuel derived products. There's a full spectrum there.
Thank you. Okay, moving into the second round, which is 5 minutes each. We'll start with Mr. McLean.
I showed up today in person so I could ask questions. I hope you take note of that. But the first question I'll ask is regarding the trade. Obviously, this is a sector that we do very well at in Canada. And I noted in the comments that trade and trade agreements are going to be an important part of our industry growth going forward. And in that respect, can you please comment on how the clean fuel standard will affect your competitive position with our trade partners? Mr. Nybor.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Kate, if I miss anything. I think right now it's a bit early to tell, as there's still a lot of detail to be worked out. Our most initial focus has been back to my original point of avoiding unnecessary duplication. We're an industry that's very comfortable with laws and regulation. Let me tell you that. We're very heavily regulated. I think especially in an economic downturn where the tolerance and the patience for that is when you start seeing duplication that's driving no human health or environmental benefit. And one of the pieces we're working on in the clean fuel standard right now is related to buffer zones. There's currently a requirement, if your biomass is to be included, it needs to be, I can't remember the buffer's 25 meters, but there's a buffer zone around bodies of water that the federal standard in draft has specified. Well, you know, every body of water is different, and this goes back to local planning and local science. So to make a judgment call that 25 or 30 meters needs to be the buffer for every body of water across Canada is ridiculous. So we've been working with ECCC officials, and they've been open to that conversation. But those are the kinds of things, Clean Fuel Standard can drive a lot of benefit on the bioeconomy side for a number of our pulp mills, getting into that biofuel space. But the regulations need to be drafted in a way where we're not tripping over existing provincial requirements.
Thanks, Mr. Nyborg. The current legislation or the current regulation that's coming forward, I'm sure you've seen it, does have duplications. So hoping for a different outcome at this point in time, are you suggesting that your industry will have some exemptions from the CFS as are being presented at this point in time?
Yeah, I'm not going to prejudge what their decision is going to be. We've been feeding into the process. We've been talking to the ADM responsible and Minister Wilkinson's office to try to work towards a solution that's going to bring about benefit for our sector in that forest bioeconomy.
Thank you. Let's talk about GHG emissions if we can here, which are also very important to this equation. I noticed that the bulk of the energy supplied or consumed by the pulp and paper industry is actually sourced. So it actually is, if you say wood residue that powers the pulp and paper industry. Can you explain what the GHG emissions are on self-sourced, as in wood fiber, vis-a-vis what we look at as coal being a high GHG emission industry?
Kate, can you speak to that?
Sure. And so Derek mentioned in his opening that pulp and paper mills have reduced their greenhouse gas emissions by 66% since 1990, and that was largely done through a transition away from coal and more away from fossil fuels as well. I think pulp and paper companies have taken the initiative to do green transformation and build what's called cogeneration components to their facilities. So they're using the wood waste that's provided through the sawmilling process, and then that wood waste is used in a large-scale boiler, and it's creating electricity that then runs the pulp and paper mill. And in many instances in Canada, the facilities are now creating excess green electricity, which is going back into the public electricity grid. And currently, we estimate that at the amount of green electricity that would power the city of Calgary. So it's quite significant. I would say that there are instances just based on where facilities are located that they may have less options as far as transitioning away from fossil fuels, but it's still very much the intention of the forest sector to be a low carbon solutions provider and to really, full utilization of that wood product. So there's zero waste, and then the carbon that the carbon is being sequestered.
Ms. Lindsay, if I can actually interrupt here, I need a scientific explanation about how wood residue has less of a soot and less of a carbon footprint than hydrocarbons. If you can, please.
In 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Well, I'll do my best to maybe get you some information in writing, just from a life cycle analysis that would compare the two, and that might be best to provide that to you in writing.
Thanks very much. Mr. Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour tout le monde. Derek.
Hello, everyone.
De faire votre rencontre.
Mr. Sabare, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm from Sudbury, but I'm from Keptikasing. My father-grandfather worked in pulp and paper in Swiss Falls. And so your comments are really interesting. My questions now. In your opening remarks, you mentioned the difference between the percentage.
Because I'm hearing you and the translator at the same time, and I think it's pretty tough to follow.
Okay. Monsieur le greffier.
Is this any better? Or am I still coming through on both channels? Mr. Lefebvre, could you please ensure that you have chosen French among the options at the bottom of your Zoom page? That should solve things. Go ahead. Very good. So, in your opening remarks, Mr. Sumray, you said, I think it was 0.2% of forests are logged in Quebec, where the potential allocated amount is 1%. Anyway, could you just tell us briefly Have I understood that correctly, first? And second, if that's the case, why is that the case? Yeah, 0.2% of 940,000 square kilometers that is cut. And the reason is pretty simple. A third of the forest is available to the industrial sector. It's being close enough. And 2/3 are protected, also for environmental purposes, for waterways and so on, as Mr. Nyber has pointed out, and also to respect First Nations. So the forest that the industry can access is that area of Quebec. And the reasons for which we haven't reached what the maximum amount permitted is because there are rules to the effect that within any 1 year, there's a certain amount of forest that we can harvest, and then that can't be overshot within any specific year. There were areas in Quebec with deciduous forests that have some softwood lumber in them, softwood. In those cases, we won't necessarily go in to get that because the pulp and paper sector has enough with the chips and so on. And there have been a lot of cuts. So that said, I think it's important to ensure that the pulp and paper sector transforms, updates to be able to use all the new chemistry about fibers and cellulose and so on. It's really essential that that take place to be able to maximize treatment of all the forest that's available and that we can use in a sustainable way, everything from the forest. And this will also help us counter the use of plastic. So there's a good project there. I think the programming should be developed for it. Very good point. A point that I wanted to touch on. So what sort of programming are you imagining? Because right now we've got what we call the IFIT program, the Investment in Forestry Industry Transformation Program. And in English, that's what we call it. Is that enough, though? Biomass, biofuels, bioplastics, there's a lot that can be done. Also, in our study, we want to really see to it that we use the forestry sector to the maximum. Are we really maximizing what it can offer Canada? I think so far we're saying no, we're not really doing that. So what more can we add to ensure that this transformation gets us there? Look, I think that the IFIT program is very popular. For every dollar, $10 are being asked for, of course. And most of those projects would be excellent, would really do the job. So put more money into the program. I think the forestry sector is really essential to Canada's economy, and it deserves more support and a better transition plan. Think about it. Remember the figures I've given you. Each cubic meter, if I go back to the 4.8 billion in Canada, so each cube, that's $155 in taxes. That goes back to the government, and the federal government gets half of that, provincial government 2/3. So keep in mind that more we use wood, more the Treasury will benefit. And, of course, sustainable wood use, which is what we're doing. And I think that programming that will support that transformation to reach this point, biofuels, for example, you can use biomass instead of a number of other types of fuels for heating. So we really need to move forward on this. Really go for added value, more money in R&D, and more money for strategic purchases as well within the federal government procurement to give new companies a chance to get going. They've been able to say, look, we've done this for the government, we can do it. This is a very popular approach in the Scandinavian countries, and I think that Canada could make use of that approach.
I gave you a little extra time to make up for the time we lost, but I think we're at the end here. So we've got about just under 5 minutes left in this segment, and Mr. Simard and Mr. Cannings each have 2.5 minutes. So Mr. Simard, why don't you go first?
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to rapidly just go back to the IFIT program. We know that over the next 3 years, it's $42.9 million, a small comparison for a single project, the Coastal Gas Link, $500 million, 82 million and 500, 42 compared to 500. So this is a good example of how unfairly we are treating these two sectors. These two natural resource sectors, the oil and petrol sector and the forestry sector. A colleague a little earlier mentioned fossil fuel standards. 5% is what's being requested on fuel and 2% on diesel and heavy oil, keeping in mind that Canada is probably the country that has, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the right word, that has, I'm really sorry, I'm just looking for the right word. How odd. Forestry resource, perhaps? How simple that would be. No, biomass. There we are. I had bioproduct in mind. I didn't want to say bioproduct. It sounded so silly. Biomass, given that Canada has a very high biomass resource per capita, more than any other country. Do you think that this 5% and this 2% is enough for clean fuels? Shouldn't we basically have higher targets? Well, I think that what's good about targets is that there's something you can reach. Ideally, reach them fast and then take a good look at how you reach them and then look at how you can move the targets forward and how you're going to get to the next step. That's what they're for, in my view. The forestry sector, when it comes to cuts, to actually cut the wood is using quite a lot of fossil fuel. We might have some programming such as $4 million from the federal government that other programs have received in Canada for hybrid vehicles to move out some of that fossil fuel and replace it. I think that sort of programming for the forestry sector and to buy new equipment, hybrid fuel equipment, for example, research and development on new hydrogen-fueled equipment to ensure that we reach carbon neutrality in this sector as fast as possible. Now, that would be good. Yes, some projects have been funded for the Canadian consumer, and it would be smart to do it for our sector right now. The timing is right. It would be very relevant. Same thing that the mining sector got, this support to develop and purchase equipment that is less of a greenhouse gas problem. That would be useful for us as well.
Governments to continue to work with customers and investors on.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there. Perfect. Okay, we're right on time. Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Okay, Mr. Samray, thank you very much for joining us today. That unfortunately we're out of time in this hour, so we have to move on. Derek, Kate, you're sticking around, I believe.
It's been my pleasure, and feel free to contact us if you have a further question. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Okay, so let's suspend for 1 minute, everybody, and then we'll come back on with the next panel. Welcome to our new witnesses, Mr. Nightbird and Ms. Lindsay. Maybe you can fill us in on what's new since last time you're at the committee. We have from FP Innovations, Mr. Renault and Ms. Mathieu. Thank you very much both for joining us today. And from Sterex, Mr. Dolin. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Can all of you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. Each group, Mr. Nyber, I'm assuming you guys aren't going to do another, no, okay. So each of FB Innovations and Cerex have up to 10 minutes for opening remarks, and then we'll open the floor to questions. So why don't we start with FB Innovations?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. We are glad to be here today in front of you. So we're here to talk to you about the relaunch of the forestry industry. And for us, it's really about scaling up. It's about moving faster, accelerating the transformation of the industry towards the bioeconomy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think you all received a document from us. So I'll move to slide 2, if that's the case. Can you confirm, Mr. Chair, that you have received a document?
I personally don't recall seeing it. When did you send it? Mr. Clerk, do we have the document translated? Maybe is that the problem?
We send it in both languages.
Okay, so that's
yes. I think I sent it prior to the meeting. No? Okay.
Okay. I don't have a copy of it, but
let me look into it, and I could send it electronically if need be. Resend it. Yeah. Thank you.
That's okay. We can still go as. Yeah. So listen, I'll talk probably a bit first about FP Nation, et en passant bonjour à tous. S'il y a des questions en français, ça va être mon plaisir.
And hello, I'll be happy to respond in French if you have your questions in French for me.
So I'll do the pitch in English, and then we can move from there. So what is FP Innovation first, probably? FP is a private, not-for-profit organization. It's an applied research center. So we don't do fundamental research. We are focusing on applying research, make things happen in the mills, in the sawmills directly for real. So our key mission is to help the forest industry be more competitive and also to help it transform, to evolve. And that's critical in the situation we are in now, where the pandemic, the situation with COVID have created a place where we actually have shook up a bit the markets and shook up the industry. So it's all about relaunching. It's all about moving forward faster so we can take our place in the bioeconomy. So what is that? What is the bioeconomy? Well, I mean, to make it simple, is to create an economy based on biology. So for us in the forest industry, is about how do we use trees? How do we use the forest to create a more active economy? So it's how do I use a sustainable forest? I harvest trees, and then I use them to build more with wood, to use fiber from the forest and to put it in multitude of products. So I can create product that help to capture carbon. I can create new product that actually reduce the load on carbon across the economy. And I can create products that are biodegradable or that can be recycled more easily. All right, so that's all great concept, but if you really get down to it, what is it to have a bioeconomy? At the end, quite practically, it means that you should look around you in a certain amount of time and see more building built with wood. You also should see, if you're in Prince George, if you're in Saguenay, if you're in Latuc, if you're in Thunder Bay, biorefineries, bioproduct plants that transform chips of wood, residue of wood into bioproduct. Precursor of chemistries that will create the new bioplastic. Concretely, that's what a success in bioeconomy means. It's not just a concept, it's creating those mills. You know, and if you look at Canada, we're actually at the tipping point right now. Other countries have moved faster than us. In Europe, you can see now biorefineries, complete plants being built in the Nordic country. And in Germany, we have some announcements recently. Even in Brazil. In Canada, we need to accelerate. We need to go faster. We need to create the context in which we can do that at scale. And scale is important. That's what we need to do. But what's great about the bioeconomy? What's great about the forest industry? There's a fundamental thing that we all need to remember constantly is the forest industry does three things for all of us constantly when we grow it. Of course, it creates more economical impact for the regions. It creates more economic impact per se, but it also helps for climate change. It's actually one of the rare sectors where you help three things at the same time: the economy, the regional growth, and the carbon economy. The three at the same time. So anytime we grow, we can do this. So we put actually in the federal pre-budget consultation two asks. We try to make them as clear and crisp as possible. Those are the missing pieces to accelerate the bioeconomy, to accelerate the scale-up of the bioeconomy. The first recommendation was to provide funding on the order of 10 million per year for 5 years to demonstrate and accelerate those scale-up elements. Help reduce the risk of scaling up. If you want to construct a large biorefinery tomorrow, it's not an investment of $10 million. It could be as large as $500 million. So we need to help the industry de-risk that path as fast as possible so we can help their decision process. We need also to really understand where to go. The bioeconomy means multiple products that come out of the trees, in multiple elements that we can form, multiple supply chain we need to enter. From the same chip of tree, I'll put product that go into asphalt, that goes into plastic, that goes into insulation and construction. All different molecules, all different markets that need to open at the same time. So reducing risk is important. That's the first recommendation. The second one is to create public procurement policy. We can pull on those markets. We can prime them. We can start them. And that starts with a public procurement policy. Select the right market to enter, create a public policy, de-risk the industry, capital investment with the right technical activity. That's what we need to accelerate. So is that possible? Is that real? Am I just talking in big terms? Well, I'll give you an example that we lived through this summer when we actually start a project to create masks to respond to the pandemic. We took the challenge with the help of an Arcan to say, okay, is it possible to create a biodegradable mask tomorrow, to produce it at large scale? So taking up the challenge, we did actually in 3 months a demonstration that this can be industrialized and put on a tissue machine in the order of weeks now from the work we've done. Why? How can we do that? We could do that because we have at end the facility to scale up rapidly. I could pass from my chemistry lab, and the afternoon I was on a pilot machine, and I was running the pilot machine. And if it runs on a pilot machine, I can then go into a mill, and within 1 week, I can produce millions of filtration media per day. That's what we need to do. It's more of those industrially focused activity in R&D to accelerate scale up of products, de-risk scale up of products. So if we do that, then we can dream of the bioeconomy. We can dream of those plants being created in Prince George, in Quesnel, in Thunder Bay, in Le Tuc. We can think about a future for an industry that is now under the stress of a rapidly transforming economy. With this, Mr. Chair, I complete my presentation.
That's great. Thanks very much. It's been pointed out to me that I said that the witnesses had up to 10 minutes. That's an example of old habits die hard. It's actually 5 minutes, which we agreed on earlier, so my apologies. But in the circumstances, Mr. Dolin, I'll give you more than 5 minutes, which I did for others. So please proceed.
Merci, mais en tout cas, je pense que...
Thank you. In any case, I think that within 5 minutes, I will have been able to give you a little introduction. I had timed for 5 minutes. I'll try not to go over that to leave you more time for questions, however. I'm sorry? Do you hear me? Very well, CEREX. We do applied research at the level of colleges. We are a member of about 59 college tech transfer centers, which are affiliated with a number of colleges and CEGEPs here in Quebec. We are affiliated with the CEGEP de Rimouski, the Rimouski CEGEP, and our labs are in the Matapedia Valley, a forestry area near Rimouski and Amqui. And we offer training as well as research. And our specialties are processing wood and also sustainable development and sustainable construction. We have expertise as well in chemistry and in biomass fuel. Our center, well, we're a small center compared to other. Of course, we have 18 full-time employees. These are researchers specialized in wood science, engineers, chemists, and technicians. We also have 7 CEGEP teachers in architecture and engineering who contribute to our research projects as well. We also hire interns, students, who contribute to our research. We had 11 interns from colleges and universities who worked with us in the last year, for example. We have $2.1 million in business over the last year, which allowed us to carry out 82 applied research projects, technical assistance, and training projects with 67 different clients. We work a good deal with small and medium-sized businesses all over Quebec. I mentioned that we are a member of the Synchronex network, and since 2019, we are recognized as a technology access center with the group Tech Access Canada with its 60 college-level technology access centres across Canada. Our two associations, Synchronex and Tech Access Canada, associated with Polytechnique Canada, a college and institutes of Canada, which basically represent the research sector across Canada, to suggest to the federal government a strategy for investing in the applied research strengths in colleges and institutes to support the socioeconomic development of Canada. I won't go into the details of our proposal, $165 million to be spread over all the numbers of colleges and institutes in 2 parts. We are also part of a group of 8 centers of members of Synchronex who offer resources for forestry products, from forestry management through building equipment and furniture. These are all a number of groups working on forestry innovation. We work with them on a regular basis. So there we have 240 experts overall, of which 50 teachers, and annual private and public investments of $18 million a year. We work with over 425 clients on innovative projects, and we also participate in training 60 students at the college level. We offer internships. Last year, over 11,000 internships hours were provided for students participating in these projects. So how can we help? Well, I'll be suggesting just quickly a couple of measures that will help support the forestry sector and allow it to contribute to fighting greenhouse gases. We were mentioning the more planting to make for a larger carbon sink using our forests. That's a good idea, of course. I've heard people mention the transitioning our pulp and paper plants, allowing us to replace plastics with those products, using the expertise within our group, for example, in construction. We need to work to strengthen bio construction, which will not produce as many greenhouse gases, using, of course, mass timber construction and also other products that can be used for this purpose. We also need to work the sawmills differently, avoid producing only first-level products, and the sort of things that run into the tariffs that we meet at the border with the United States, and also move to produce biomass energy. And of course, I could get into more details if you have questions for me. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Mr. Patzer, you're first up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. And I just want to thank everybody for sharing today. I'm just going to start back with Mr. Nybor, though. And just for me, as somebody growing up in an agricultural riding with a farm background myself, there seem to be a lot of similarities between the two sectors and some shared issues. In terms of further developing your industry, especially with a clear focus on technological innovations, I'm curious to know how the lack of rural and remote access to broadband or cell services affects these efforts.
Yeah, it's significant, and we do have a lot in common with our friends in agriculture. I say one of the big differences is the significant public land base upon which we're operating, which means different regulatory frameworks and whatnot. But when you think about where we're operating, the kind of stewardship work we're doing, and how important that is to families in rural communities, we're in lockstep. I don't know if Stefan might want to talk a little bit about some of the Forestry 4.0 work that FP Innovations is doing, but broadband access is really critical to us not only doing day-to-day work in some of these more rural and remote communities, but also to accelerating innovation, advancing drone technology, and advancing some of the innovation in forest operations. I don't know, Stefan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just, if there's anything there you wanted to share, because it is a huge barrier and a huge opportunity for the future of our sector.
No, if I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to add up a little bit here. Yes, it's a shared challenge. It's a shared opportunity as well. And that's also, it's agri, it's mining, it's everything up north where broadband is a little bit more scarce. It's also about developing communication solutions. So we're working on other communication solutions that can be broadband or something different. We need to transfer the data. We need to transfer enough data so we can optimize operation, automate machineries. Again, you can dream someday of having everything automated up north in certain part of a mining field or forestry field. But basic access of data so people can optimize operation is something we do today. Increasing the bandwidth, so getting to broadband is something we need to strive towards. But getting this collaboration in all the sectors is probably the key access to that. And we live it on roads every day. We construct roads with the mining sector. We construct roads with the military to optimize the north. Keeping at those is extremely important. I don't know if that covers what you want me to cover, Derek.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess both of you, if both of you want to take a turn answering this one too, even like you look at, like you mentioned mining, whether it be oil and gas, different sectors, what they're doing is they're building out the broadband and the data access at the same time as they're building these operations. Is that happening in forestry as well too? Or is there a way to build that infrastructure out at the same time?
Yes, I mean, it's all a matter of planning, right? So the difference is planning roads. We have a history of doing it over the long term, and we keep at it. Technology have evolved rapidly, and the need for technology in forestry in terms of broadband have surged, I will say, in the last years. We can dream now of what we can do with broadband that we were not dreaming about 10 years ago. So there are synergy, there's an accelerated need for it. And it's also a way, which is extremely important, to find a way to get job of higher quality around forestry as well. Think about this. If I can operate a machinery with all those screens around me, with all that artificial intelligence, those robotics that enable me to be in the field and control 5 machines at the same time, that's a much cooler job for our young kids up north than just being on the rough and alone with your diesel machine. That's where we're going. The same way the mining industry have done that transfer a little bit in some section of the world, we're going there, and we need to get there because we don't have enough people.
Yeah.
And we need to attract the young.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Nybor, in your opening remarks, you mentioned that you are concerned about a campaign to prevent Canadian forestry from thriving using misinformation tactics. I'm sure you're aware that this is not a unique issue to forestry and is shared across the natural resource sector. Do you have any specific examples you would like to share here with us with this committee?
Yeah, and on U.S. election day and talking about polarization and emotion, and I don't need to talk to a group of MPs about fake news and frustration in terms of messages being distorted. So I don't want to be here whining about this, but it is a frustration when you do have such a strong story to tell, and there are groups, many of them outside of Canada, trying to influence Canadian land-based decisions and local community decisions. The one I would highlight would be the Natural Resource Defense Council, built out of the U.S. that's working with some Canadian surrogates to try to lobby companies like Procter & Gamble and others to stop sourcing from Canada. It's spreading misinformation, and once again, I go back to our public land and the work we do with provincial and federal governments, the data that the Canadian Forest Service has when it comes to carbon information and how robust that State of Canada's forest report is that NRCan issues every year. And I'll say, I think we're the only country in the world that I'm aware of that does a formal, comprehensive, full report on the state of our forests. We have an active Canadian Council of Forest Ministers at the provincial level and the territorial level that have a lot of information. We're going to stand up for ourselves. We're going to stand up for our workers. But given the public land piece of this as well, we believe there's more government federally and provincially can do to speak truth to some of this silliness.
Thank you very much. I think that's about my time. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Patzer. Yeah, you were right on time. So I appreciate that. Mr. Sidhu, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for providing valuable insights into the industry. Mr. Renault, you spoke briefly about biodegradable masks, and for that, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for the work that you're doing researching and developing PPE, particularly around developing face masks made from wood fiber that are expected to be biodegradable through the Mask Pack project. This is the type of innovation we need and showcases all types of industries coming together to protect Canadians during this pandemic. Can you update us more on the efforts in this area and share any lessons learned so far?
I need to learn to unmute to answer the question. That would be better, I think. So yes, absolutely. So in terms of progress, where we have at this point is we find the recipe to do the filtration layer. We're struggling, like every Canadian research institution, with the actual tests and certification. There's a lot of variation that create a lot of discussion, but that's all good. That's scientists arguing with one another about this is better than that. But we have solution out there for the filtration media. And now we're working on the other layer. We have 5 solutions in the work, and I'm expecting results within the next weeks up to Christmas to say, I can do a fully biodegradable mask with those 3 layers on a tissue or paper machine, and that's the key. So from there, here's the lesson learned. A tissue machine could produce anywhere between 1 to 10 million masks per day. To do that, you need to displace what the tissue machine is doing. The incentive for the companies needs to be there. The collaboration between all the members of the supply chain need to be there. It's getting the team together into a highly competitive market, especially in the tissue world. I mean, if there's a place in pulp and paper where all the companies are competing, is the tissue market, where there's a lot of independent. So getting them to respond to a procurement need is what we need to have happen. So solution is there if we need it, will be there. Now it's getting all our ducks in a row to make it happen across procurement, Health Canada, technical solution, pulp and paper company, is getting the Canadian solution all together and really focusing on winning this now.
Thank you for that, Mr. Renault, and we look forward to seeing that product, especially when we're seeing all our garbage cans, filling up with all these disposable masks. My next question to you is: can you speak more to the importance of NRCan's Transformative Technologies program? What types of technological advancements does funding like this enable?
I mean, if I look at the different source of funding, my organization or the industry bet on in terms of transforming the industry, the TT program, the Transformative Technology Program, is the bedrock of everything. That's where we explore each technology that can transform the industry and bring it from a low technology readiness level to a higher technology readiness level. From there, we can start to make those alliances, those demonstration projects, those next step projects. But that's where we can look at everything from Forestry 4.0, which we just talked about, which is broadband, to industrialization of construction, to bioproduct that range from bioplastic, lignin in asphalt, carbon fiber from wood. Every possible stream of bioproduct is explored under the TT program. So it's the bedrock. It's from that money, from that effort that we start everything. From there, we can do the rest.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I know you briefly touched on the priorities of FP Innovations. Looking forward, what opportunities do you see for areas in the bioeconomy? Where would you recommend the government focus its efforts on?
I think there's 2 things that are really important forward. It's going to be at some point to make it real. I'm a scientist. I love science. I can do science every day. But making the bioeconomy real is about taking the 1, 2, 3 things and really focusing to push them through commercialization and scale up. If I look at bioplastic, there is literature, scientists work in bioplastics since 40 years. We do wonderful things in the labs. What is real, what is not? Pick a few battles and carry them through so we can prime this bioeconomy. So I think that's the most important thing forward. I'm looking at bioplastic. I'm looking at what we call regenerated fiber. What we do in the labs now is you take fiber of wood that are beautiful, of course, but bizarre shape and forms and difficult to work with. We dissolve them and we reconstruct fiber from it. And then we can add all those other biochemistry to it and do everything from, well, I'll get to the list. Diapers, carbon fibers, high strength materials, composite. You recreate basically all the bioproducts you can do with the classical petroleum chemistry.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? Mr. Chair?
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. I've got one last question for FPAC Canada to Ms. Lindsay or Mr. Nyber. I know we've seen the importance of pulp and paper and pulp products in the use of PPE and sanitary wipes, hospital gowns, and many other necessary products. Can you share a little bit? I know Mr. Renault talked about the biodegradable mask, but can you share more about what the work that the forest products firms are doing on the PPE front, other than the biodegradable masks?
Super quickly.
Yeah, just think of the Harmac mill on the West Coast that is making pulp for medical gowns. I think the biggest thing is we're exporting a lot of uniquely Canadian premium reinforced pulp that's going out of the country and coming back in as PPE. I think there's an opportunity to do more on the value add side, leveraging our natural resources here at home.
Great, thank you. Mr. Simard, over to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Renaud, you gave us a lovely demonstration about biorefining. We know that the forestry sector often works with common products for consumers. It does help capture carbon, of course, but the Europeans have done more than that. They have gone for biomass. Could you give us the advantages for Canada of really going seriously into bioproducts with biorefineries?
Anyone's free to answer.
Non, c'est bon. J'ai toujours de la difficulté avec mon bouton. Et voilà, c'est fait. Vous m'entendez bien? Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Are you able to hear me now? Are you able to hear me now?
Oui, c'est mon erreur. J'ai oublié de...
Yes, I'm so sorry. That was my mistake. I forgot to enter translation here at the bottom of my screen. So the advantage is higher up in the value chain. We've got to get higher up in the value chain. If we don't, then our paper will be available but not required in all markets. We do have an exceptional forest given its value, its life cycle. It's very renewable, so it's a very high carbon value. Everyone wants to use our forest because it has this very high value for greenhouse gas management. But you have to go through transformations. If we just go up the scale on transformations, we can add value like crazy. We can really do a good job of that. Overall, the main purchasers, plastics, for example, will be the big chemistry plants, the Dow Chemicals, that group. They will be the ongoing purchasers. They can take our fiber and they can transform it, process it where they are, or they could buy it here and process it here. The aim would be to keep as much processing here. That would be of great economic advantage, and do that out in the regions. I think this is the big advantage we need to go for. So to get to that, to set up that type of industry, what can the government do? Because we know processing in pulp and paper for companies, it really costs a great deal of money, and they don't necessarily have enough capital to get that going. So what could the federal government do to get biorefineries up and running? Well, the most important measure that you could take is something that we have suggested recently through the budget process, or something equivalent, would be to help the sector by funding activities that allow for scaling up, the real famous scale up. You said so well in English. How do you reduce the risk of investing capital? As I said, in a lab, I can do this at home, no problem. It's always going to work. But when I want to scale up to actually create something with it, that's the big challenge. So what are the big risks of scaling up? That's what we need to identify and need to help there. Moreover, if I want to get involved with Dow, Michelin, Dow Chemicals, and so on and so forth, with the bigs of the world, the big chemistry companies, what do they want? They don't want 1 pound of my substance. They want tons of it to launch their production chain, to see if it's going to work. That's what we did at Thunder Bay. We've got something that allows us to create 1 ton of sugar in different ways, in tons, and send them off to various companies to be able to show them we can do it. And this is what you can look at. Take a look. They have to have a sufficient amount to be able to interact on the manufacturing level at all, to even have that conversation. So that scaling up is really what's necessary to give us a foot up so that we can get involved with the main actors. Do I have a question for time for a quick question for Mr. Dana? Yes? Good. Thank you. Mr. Dana, I went to see you this summer and I was surprised to see how much you were able to do with biomass. I'm not sure if you could tell the committee then what sort of bioproducts and bioenergy you've been able to produce at Cerex. Yes, Chair. I could give you a couple of examples of projects that we're working on right now. For example, we are using softwood lumber, the outside of the tree, the bark, as basic materials to produce adherents. For example, adherents to make laminates. Perhaps there's 10% of a kind of a glue and adhesive, which usually is petrol-based, but we can now use the bark of trees to produce this adhesive. So that makes a really bio-sourced product, something that we can encourage. We've also been able to produce insulating fibers using the same bark. We also have a project up and running now with 4 different companies to produce biocides, disinfectants, surface disinfectants to kill bacteria, or even agents that will help protect cosmetics, keep them from going bad. And all this is biosourced. This is from forestry biomass. These are some examples.
Mr. Cannings, over to you.
Well, thank you to the witnesses again. I'll start off with Monsieur Renou. You mentioned the biorefineries that European countries are building, and suggested that we could be looking at building these types of biorefineries across Canada, small rural towns that have been hit with reductions in the forest industry. In British Columbia, as people have mentioned, there's any number of examples of that. I guess my question is twofold. One is, how much fiber do these biorefineries need? Is this something that we could fit into the forest sector as it is now and not impinge on it, or would it be something that would replace, say, a sawmill that is making 2x4s now, and use less fiber so that they could fit into a scenario in British Columbia, especially? We're going to be in a fiber crunch for the coming decades. And is this something that we could provide more jobs for less fiber? I think that's one of the big challenges that we have facing the forest industry, at least here in British Columbia.
No, absolutely. At least in the case of British Columbia is challenging with the access of fiber and all the natural calamities that didn't help the amount of fiber available. It's interesting. You look at today in British Columbia, you look at the effort of Canfor, for instance, that have dabbled a bit with some partners around biofuels and making some progress there. There is the potential for adding to any paper mill you see or sawmill a unit that create bioproduct. On the pulp and paper side, the advantage is you will use a lot of installation in terms of effluent management in terms of chemical plants in general, especially if it's a kraft mill. You can do a lot of the unit operation using the current equipment. The investment must worth it in terms of keeping that plant up to date in all the dimensions, but you can add to, there's a value. In case of a sawmills, when you think about the different residues, you can also have process that can be added to a sawmill to go create a certain type of bioproduct. That's exactly what we need to think about, is adding to those mills an extra step. This said, to get there, we need to de-risk. We need to help the pulp and paper industry and the wood industry to get into that new wave of bioreactors, of enzymes, bacteria that you need to play with to create those bioproducts. Because that's a path that is a bit new for all the industry, and that's part of the challenge. In terms of creating new jobs, yep, it has this potential. It creates new types of jobs. It's actually interesting because I was thinking about Alberta the other day and having a discussion with some folks in Alberta. There are so much skills in the petrochem industry that I want to go grab today to come help me on the bio side. All those process engineers, all those people that are used to develop large-scale mills, operations, chemistry, reactors, they can be used also in the bioeconomy. So it's about making that transformation. It's about making that step, if I answered your question.
I guess at least partially. But it just twigged another question in me that I wasn't thinking of asking, but now I will. And that is, you mentioned the petrochemical industry, the oil and gas industry. And here in my riding in Fruitvale, there's a company building a new plant to take forest waste products and create renewable natural gas. Yep. And this is a big plant they're building. It's not some add-on on it happens to be on an old brownfield site from an old sawmill that went out of business years ago. But they have plans to build this and perhaps several more. And is that something that FP Innovations gets into, the production of fuels like renewable natural gas from forest waste products? Again, we've heard of, right now the interior BC is very smoky because all this slash is being burned. Yes. More carbon than all the cars in British Columbia put together. And this is a way to create a cleaner fuel. Is that something that you've been hearing and are promoting?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're involved in all the RNG project we can. We're having a team in BC, Vancouver, actually working on this, as well on the east side, more on the liquid fuel side with the electric team. There is a lot to do there. I think if I go back to your first question to make the link, if I realize what I didn't answer now, it's this volume question. How much fiber, right? If we get to bioproduct that have a higher value, then the ratio of value and jobs to amount of fiber will change. That's the key. If I make fiber today at $900 a ton, if I go make an added value product at a higher price, then I create more value around it. And it's technically more difficult, so I do create more jobs around it too. So there is a path there that we need to think about. There is something the forest industry won't do. The forest industry cannot replace all the jet fuel. It's too much volume. The forest industry cannot tackle also on the other extreme all the small niche product of bioproduct because there's not enough volume to justify the capex. The trick is in finding the right volume applications, which fit well what we have in terms of fiber and the value. So then I'm thinking more about promoters of bioplastic, of higher value bioplastic. When you talk about PHB is a series of plastic where the cost is much higher than polypropylene or normal plastic, where there's an added value.
Thanks very much. I'm gonna have to stop you there. Apologies for interrupting. Thanks, Mr. Kennings. Ms. Harder, over to you for 5 minutes.
Sorry, just I'll give that to Bob Zimmer, please.
Okay, sure. All right, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I will say looks like my internet connection is unstable. I'm sitting here in my office in the constituency, but alas, here we go. Derek, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you all the panelists for testifying today. But Derek, you mentioned, I want to follow along with what my colleague Rachel Harder had been asking about, and that's the 2 billion trees question, but elaborate a little bit for us. I just wanted to confirm, you said what your organization is planting right now in Canada is 5 to 6 million seedlings per year. Is that accurate?
No, I think, I'm not sure if I made the mistake or if it came back from Ms. Harder, but it's 500 to 600. It's closer to 600 million annually. It's been as low as a little over 500 million annually.
So quite a bit. Yeah, because the math there just, it would take many of our lifetimes to even get close to the 2 billion, but even it's going to be a set of numbers that's quite ambitious to say the least. So a bit of calculation I did, 2 billion trees, you said it's approximately 1,000 trees per minute. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's at our 500 to 600,000 number. It comes out to about 1,000 per minute is if you run the calculation.
Okay, so just based on your calculation, I have 1,000 per minute, so that's about 6,000 per hour for 8 hours a day. It works out to about 480,000 trees per day. That said, it would take 4,166 days to plant that amount of trees. Now, we all know that you can't plant trees in the north in 365 days of the year. So approximately the planting season is about 120 days per year. I think that's accurate. About 4 months a year. Is that accurate, Derek?
Yeah, it depends on
5 months.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It would depend. It can vary from province to province.
Sure. So based on those numbers, we're looking at, just to plant the 2 billion trees, we're looking at 34 years to plant the 2 billion trees. And this government currently has no plan to even start. And I think I'll just say this and I'll ask you another question, Derek. I think it highlights, we've seen this with the Sofa Lumber Agreement. There's no plan to really tackle that issue. There's no plan to plant the 2 billion trees. There's no plan to help our forest industry. There's no plan to help our mills. There's no plan to help our loggers, and there's no plan to help our forestry workers. And I think it signals a sad reality, and I hope that changes. But I'm just going to move on to the next question, Derek, for you again. And I hate to keep picking on you, but you're the guy that we've asked many questions before. I guess you know a lot about this stuff. You talked about the forest sink, and you said 14 megatons. And I just wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit, because I think what's often not highlighted and what we've been referring to a little bit earlier is already what a great job the forest industry is doing really to sequester carbon, to just growing trees, using biomass to heat mills and to use to make energy with. So can you just explain the 14 megatons?
Yeah, and I'm actually, with your permission, with the chair's permission, I'd like Kate, who's our in-house carbon forestry expert, to get to the nut of that.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Zimmer, for the question. Mm-hmm. And this is available in Canada's State of Canada's Forest Report that NRCan produces, and there's quite a team of carbon modelers at the Canadian Forest Service, and this is in line with international science that we really need the managed forest to sequester the most carbon moving forward. That the area that's under management is sequestering more carbon than the unmanaged forest. And so this 14 megatons comes out of the carbon budget model. So that's based on the area of where we have monitoring set up across Canada and a whole bunch of inputs around growth and yield and the species and what those are capable of storing. And then I think where the evolution is going, which is fantastic, is the carbon sequestered in the harvested wood products, particularly those long-lived products like the mass timber we were just talking about. And so that's calculated in there as well. And so it's really about maximizing that carbon sequestration potential using forest management into the future.
Mr. Zimmer, with your permission, can I just add on quickly there?
You bet.
Because as the government embarks on its conservation agenda, and conservation is very important. What we find ourselves in the middle often of a debate of managed active forest management, sustainable forest management in Canada is about conservation. About half of our managed forest is under some kind of a conservation measure. There's no doubt as the government pursues that ambitious conservation agenda, there are some groups out there that want to use that as an opportunity or an excuse to just lock down land, get industry, whether it's mining or oil and gas or forestry, off the landscape. Our counter to that is our forestry workers are that first line of defense in detecting pest infestations. We are the first line of defense when forest fires are breaking out. It's our workers who are digging trenches and fire breaks and working with local enforcement. So I challenge some of those people who want to get us off the land base, because if you imagine us off the land base, that carbon alternative, that alternative to addressing fire and pest risks in a changing climate is a very real one. And my Australian
Mr. Nyber, I'm going to have to stop you there. Sure. Thanks, Mr. Zimmer. Mr. Weiler, you're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to ask a question of all three witnesses, actually. And I really appreciate the time that everybody spent to detail some of the respective requests that are in for pre-budgets right now, and especially on how dedicating financial resources could spur innovation, whether that's shovel-ready projects, research or demonstration projects. But I was hoping to take a bit of a different tact with my first question and just mention that policies like the Clean Fuel Standard, which require emissions intensity reductions in refineries, at the same time create opportunities in more sustainable energy products. Our plan to ban single-use plastics creates opportunities in the development of biodegradable, recyclable, or reusable alternatives. And so I was hoping in this line of thinking, I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the role that you see regulations playing in encouraging innovation in the forestry sector and in the bioeconomy. And this is a question to each of the three witnesses, please.
Well, you go ahead, Stefan.
Derek will probably say the same thing a little bit around. I mean, regulation has an extremely important role. Policy is, I will say, fundamental moving forward. When you're trying to change an equilibrium in the economy to move from one type to the other, to introduce more products, to introduce biofuels, etc., you will need that accelerator in terms of policy to get us there. That's the fundamental. Now, when, which one, how, etc., a lot of debate, but it's needed to make a move. So, Derek, I'll give you the ball.
Yeah, the only thing, I'll go back to my comment around provincial and federal policy and regulatory coherence here. You know, in the development of the Clean Fuel Standard, and as I said, still under development and debate and discussion. But, you know, when we saw this land use biodiversity requirement come out, you know, the BC government that has a very ambitious bioeconomy agenda were among the first to stand up and say, whoa, 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 we have a plan here in BC. We're managing the land base. You're doing something that's kind of getting in the way or overlapping. So we welcome, now ECCC received that information. There's been good discussion to go from there. But I think in that, when it comes to forestry, given that that provincial responsibility, that really detailed regulation on biodiversity and land management that we're facing, we would just ask that the feds be mindful of that and work with your counterparts at the provincial level.
Si je peux répondre aussi à la même question, on avait dit les trois témoins, donc je vais rajouter mon petit grain de sel. Je crois qu'il faut avoir le courage d'augmenter nos contraintes pour on avait mentionné tantôt les pourcentages de carburant renouvelable. 2%.
Sorry to interrupt. The translation.
We mentioned earlier the percentage of renewable, 2%, 5%. I think that in other countries, people are much more aggressive with their regulations. I've been said that the interpretation isn't working.
Had to catch up.
OK, ça va maintenant. Ben, c'est ça. Il faut...
Very good, fine. So we need to be a little more forward-looking. It takes two things to ensure that biofuel breaks through. The government will have to set levels, targets, and we have to be pretty straightforward and aggressive with that. We also need to encourage the market. The Côte-Nord of Quebec, there is a company producing, I think it's Ardec or Énergie Côte-Nord. And this is a plant that was built with a lot of federal government help for the sort of ethanol type funding. Right now, they can't sell their product in the United States. The political situation won't allow for it. And there's no market here in Canada for their product, even if it's a renewable product. In the States, they have a program that ensures that consumers buy renewable fuel at the same price as other fuels. This type of programming down there is useful. It's called RIM, I believe, down there, and it would be helpful up here. So when the cost of fuel goes down, then it's a higher government backing for the product so that the consumer can buy the biofuel at the same price. We need to support the price while this becomes a common product.
Okay, so Mr. Samard, you have 2.5 minutes, followed by Mr. Kangs for 2.5, and then we're done.
Petite question rapide, monsieur.
I have a question. I've certainly liked what you said earlier, Mr. Renou, when you mentioned that as we move towards bioproducts, we might make sure that some provinces, such as Alberta, are players. When you think that it's mostly Quebec, 31% of jobs in forestry are in Quebec, and BC and in Quebec. Nevertheless, with the bioproducts subsector, do you think that we could move into a major economic development project across Canada that would diversify jobs in Alberta so that they wouldn't be concentrating solely on the gas and oil sector? Yes, indeed. As I mentioned earlier, we have a real need for engineers, for chemists, for organic chemists, a number of specialties that are really used in the petrol sector, oil and gas sector. So there's a transfer that's needed. We need to transfer those people over to this sector. But we really need to link the two sectors. I would say more than that. We need to link the two across the chemistry industry. Let's say we go to Sarnia, there are a lot of people in chemistry there, and then we need to link the forestry sector into that chemistry subsector, that cluster here in Canada. And that's the challenge in order to support innovation, transformation.
Est-ce que j'ai encore un peu?
Do I have a little more time, Chair?
Peut-être, monsieur.
Very well. Mr. Dana, you gave us some examples earlier of what you've been able to do in Cerex with bio-based products, glues, for example, producing glues for the construction sector. Do you have any other examples of that nature? I know that when I visited you, I saw panel products, but laminated products, but you weren't able to find any buyers for the product at the time. So would that be a way to add value, create a market for second and third level transformation wood products? Yes, indeed. To reduce the risk. I mean, when you launch a new product, such as ours, sure, you can develop them, but then you have to market them. It would be wonderful to have some help at that level to ensure that products are accepted and picked up on the market. We know that in Europe, there are a number of wood fiber insulation materials. That's not yet something we see here in North America. We know the need will grow. We know that we can produce it, but we'd have to invest massively in our plants, and there are some risks, market-based risks.
those performance elements to the code in everywhere. I think it's a continuous help we need from the government to support us removing all the roadblocks for wood to penetrate the industry of construction by pushing those performance-based code as we go along. I think we're progressing, but it's going to be a task that's going to keep going on and on and on and on for a long time. Make sure that we use the right material at the right place. That's all we ask, and wood is the right material at multiple places.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yep. I didn't see who that was. Bob. Okay.
Yeah, just Bob Zimmer here. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe just flag for the chair that we seem to be lacking the documents in a timely fashion before the meeting, and I know maybe there was translation issues around it, but I just got the documents here a little while ago. But if we could see that, just give us a bit more time with those documents, it'd be much appreciated. I know many of us didn't receive them before the meeting, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
No, that valid point, and as I mentioned earlier, I didn't get them either. But keep in mind that this meeting was put together on very short notice, and some of the witnesses didn't receive an invitation until Friday afternoon or early this week. So I think this is going to be an anomaly, but going forward, I'll be assured that that's a priority. But thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you to our witnesses. We do appreciate that. Was a good segue. I know you were invited to be here on short notice, and we are grateful for the fact that you're able to accept the invitation and provide us with such valuable information while you're here. So we thank you. This is the early stages of this study. So you got us going on the right foot. As for next meeting, I think everybody is aware we don't have a date yet. The details of schedule is still being worked out. As soon as I find out, I will let people know, and then we can plan accordingly. So in the meantime, everybody enjoy the rest of the evening, the rest of the week, and next week. I think there's people going to be rushing off to their TVs as soon as we hang up here. So, all right.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Merci.
everybody.
Merci.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Merci tout le monde. Merci beaucoup.